just want to touch on some sales tactics. I know, Graham, you said you still had a property on the market the other week, whenever that was. I had a couple of other people ask me about selling some properties. Marco, who's not on, also asked about he's selling a property that he's done a renovation on, that he either wants to sell at the end of the year or into next year. So just a couple of things that I wanted to cover was timing of when you're actually selling. Timing does help. Obviously, you want to sell when there's more buyers in the market. Real estate agents are always talking about like spring buyers, and that's normally when the buyer activity picks up around spring. That is normally true, but not always. I typically haven't liked to sell properties towards the end of the year. So December, normally not a good month to be selling properties normally, but I have seen a couple of really outstanding years in selling. So I normally look to buy around December, just because the market is quieter, there's less buyers around because people are in holiday mode. So I'm actually normally very active around the end of the year in terms of buying. I didn't buy anything last year because the market still was a bit crazy, and I wasn't sure what was going to pan out, especially the areas I was looking at buying into. And as it turned out, they sort of flatlined. They didn't have crazy increases. So if you can avoid normally selling in December, it's best to relist, in January when people come back, and around mid-January. So there is about a month normally that I wouldn't sell in. So that's mid-December to mid-January. Sometimes it can even stretch a bit further. Now, it's not to say that your property is not going to sell within that time. It's just that there's less buyers normally. People are in holiday mode. They got Christmas on the brain. They're spending money and time on other things, and they're not really looking at property. I've found from experience that buyers really come back into the market like late January, and that's because Christmas is over. Now they're back at work, kids are back at school, and then they're like, all right, got to buy a property. It's New Year's, and that's like their New Year resolution: buy a new house or buy an investment property. So that's been my experience. The other consideration around listing a property, if your property's finished, or even if it's not, even if you're selling off the plan, you got to strategically think about when you're actually going to list a property. Ideally, and this will come down to sometimes a suburb, but generally, around Australia is pretty similar. You want to list, if it's an open for inspection property, you want to list it normally on the Tuesday or Wednesday. And normally you want your agent to be telling you when is the best time to list, so that you get enough time for your open home, but you don't want to list too early or too late, so that you're not sort of top on the list, top on the ranking in terms of in your suburb. So that does depend suburb by suburb. So you're going to have to be specific about what your feedback of the agent is, or assess multiple agents and ask them when the best time to list during the week. So that's down to the micro level. Do you list on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday? Depending on the suburb. My experience has been either Tuesday or Wednesday you list, if you're doing, say, an open home. The other consideration is if you have your property on the market for average days on market. So if you're in a market where your average days on market is, say, 30 days, and again, your selling agent should be able to tell you this. You can look it up. Just use BoomScore. That's the easiest free app if you want to look up days on market. So just search BoomScore app. So BOOM. Have a look at average days on market for your suburb. Your property should be selling within those average days on market, especially if you're in the business of transacting properties, turning them over quickly. That may mean you may have to discount them slightly. Just to move stock. I've had to do that, discount it, by maybe a couple of percent, just to get it out the door quicker than average days on market, because the couple of percent I've discounted, I make it up in the holding cost. So it's same, and it's about turnover of stock sometimes. So if your property hasn't sold in that average days on market, which might be 30 days or it might be 45, you may need to look at pulling the listing down and reposting it. I've had properties before where I've sold them 3 and 4 times in really bad markets. So when the market has really come off, and unfortunately each time as the market's been declining, I've actually sold them for less money. And the buyers in one particular instance were actually falling over due to finance. So it wasn't, in that instance, it wasn't about my agent. I actually had the best agent in the area. It was actually just about the market. So the market was just performing so terribly. It was in a mining town, a largest mining town, and it was coming off the back of a mining slump. So that's been my experience where I've sold a house multiple times over. We've had to pull the listing off and then repost it, or we've had to do some creative things on the listing. So you want to create some buyer activity where we put in, you know, people love distressed sales. And as a buyer, you normally want to buy a distressed sale. But as a seller, you can still use that to your advantage to get competition. So if you want to sell the property quickly, or you've had multiple buyers, or you're in a declining market and you just want to get out, use some of those tactics as well. And your agent should be telling you this if you've got a good one. If they're not, if they're not coming up with creative ideas, then I'd probably say you find a new agent. But things that I've used to sell is, liquidating, developer liquidates stock, motivated seller, all the things buyers normally look for. But it's about creating buyer frenzy. So having multiple buyers fight over the product. You just don't want to get into a multiple buyer where they're offering 10 or 20% under market value, which is actually a good buying strategy. So it really comes down to the agent. I normally will only sign an agent for 30 or 45 days. So I'd never sign a 90-day exclusive listing with an agent. It's just that 90 days is too long. If you've got a dud agent, you want to get rid of them in normally 30 to 45 days. So that's about the average time on market. So if you have engaged an agent, whether that's off the plan or not, and they're not getting any real traction within, a month and a half or 2 months, depending on time, time in market or average days on market, you should probably look at maybe getting another one or asking them for some creative ideas. And if they don't have any, I would pull the listing down, and you normally need to pull it down for at least a week. And that means it's not on the market for a week, and then relist it as a fresh listing with a new agent. And normally what's best to do is new photos. So, change the photos up so that if it's the same buyers, the buyers aren't seeing the same photo. And then, if your property's completed and it needs to be staged, it costs more money to stage it. So if your property isn't selling, do you look at staging it? But you should have really considered that at the start, because sometimes the $4,000 or $5,000 in staging that it costs you can assist you in selling the property quicker, providing that the staging is good. I've seen some really bad properties that have been staged, but that again comes down to the market. I've sold some cheap properties in the between 250 to 450,000, and I haven't staged them. I did a whole lot of cheaper renovations. I made really good money on them back in the early days, and I didn't stage any of those properties, or majority of them. So you don't always need to stage a property, especially in the lower end of the market, or if you're selling to investors, you're mostly selling, off the plan or sight unseen, where you don't need to always stage it. So around the marketing strategies, the photos need to do the property justice so that you're getting the right number of inquiries. You want to push the listing up. So I always list a single house and normally bump it up to like a premier listing. And, the normal platforms, I've also done Facebook ads, Google ads, had some good traction with those in the past. Most agencies will have their own person that they use, and they use them day in, day out. So it's sometimes worth spending that extra little bit on marketing, which will get you the result, and it'll end up saving you the time in holding, or the costs in holding fees. The other thing is the price expectation. Some agents have a strategy with pricing. What I've found is agents that are really good need to actually believe in the price that they're going to sell the property for, and they need to have a tactic on how they do that. The only way to really suss an agent out before you engage them is to see what are the sales that they've made. And you need to know the values in that area. So you need to know whether that agent is selling below market or above market. So I've had agents that I've used to sell that have not sold properties, and I've had to sack them. And then I've had agents that have sold properties, I think at least at market value or above. So they're the agents that you want. In saying that, I've only ever had one agent who's doing a lot of my off the plan sales at the moment, where we basically don't negotiate on any pricing, and that's not a function of the market. He was selling for me even at the tail end of COVID, and we didn't negotiate on any prices. So that comes back to how good the sales agent are, and unfortunately most of them aren't. So if you're having to negotiate really heavily as a seller, then your agent isn't doing you justice, or he's giving you a bullshit price at the start. He's overinflated the price, so he doesn't really know the market. So does anyone have any questions about that? I have a question about unregistered caveats. Okay, that's completely unrelated, Graham. But I'll answer that once we just sort of wrap this up. Do we need different agents for different areas? Yes, I would say definitely use different agents for different areas. In a traditional sense, however, in saying that, one of my agents that I'm using, who I mentioned doesn't discount, he is an expert at selling land, and he's sold in various different locations. The agent that I actually have is probably, of all the agents I've used and I've seen over the years in terms of selling product, he has made by far the most money out of any agent that I've ever worked with, probably by a multiple of 10. And he's just an absolute gun. So, I'm kind of onto a winner with him, so I'll just keep using him. So, if you find an agent that's a gun that will outperform any other agent, I would just say, use them in another area, but just be mindful that sometimes niche areas will have, a specialty agent that will know the values inside and out, and they'll be able to sell above market. There's an agent near where I live that sells at a premium, and he would be my selling agent. And then there's a whole lot of other agents which cover a whole lot of other areas around the coast. So I'm in the Sunshine Coast. So there's one agent where I'd use who does a lot of coastal listings, and I know that he sells above market all the time because I see his listings and I see what sales prices he gets for them. He also sells them really quickly. So he is a very good sales agent, but he only sticks to certain pockets, whereas as I see other agents that might be good, but they might come in and they might undersell something because they don't know the true value, whereas he will get maximum dollar for it. All right, that's my spiel on sales tactics. So just in summary, timing the year helps. Don't normally list it in December or early January. If you list a property and it doesn't sell, you need to either sack your agent or come up with a new strategy, whether that be relist, like a fresh new look, new photos, floor plan, staging, price point, no price. If you do sack your agent, pull the listing down and then relist it like a week later. Don't put it up like a day later. You need to redo it like a week later, and you need to come out with something that's somewhat creative. And that's about it, really. If your property isn't selling, other than it being the agent, you might be too high on the price, or your property just may not present well. So sometimes people want too much money, nobody's willing to pay for it. If you are going to demand a premium for a property, it needs to be immaculate, or it needs to be in high demand. So it needs to have multiple buyers fighting over it, so they will pay a premium for it.